Okay, so we're live. So this session is, I just need to mute it. I was hearing myself again. So this session is the monitor respond front end live coding session. So our plan is to do this every week around the same time. Tristan and I are both front end engineers on monitor respond. So our goal is to work through our normal workflow and talk a little bit more about the thought processes, how we do things, why we do things in that way. So yeah, our plan is to do this every week, same time. So yeah, so the issue we're working on is the same as the one from 2 weeks ago, where we're adding the URL parameters. Sorry, not URL parameters, but adding information to the URL about which tab we are on within incidents. So we started that a couple of weeks ago, and you can watch the recording from that. Since then, Tristan and I have been, I don't know what you call it, tag teaming on this. So because I'm in Europe and Tristan's in New Zealand, I've been working on it during my day. Tristan's been working on it during his day, and we've made comments on the issue. And you can see the issue, read the comments, read the handover notes. It's mostly been on there. So that's been also an interesting way to work. Yeah. Actually, someone mentioned recently that this interesting way of working was of interest to some people. So if you want to ask questions on that, you can ask on this YouTube video, I guess. We can answer that. But yeah, so to start with, Tristan, maybe you could catch me up to date on this, because I haven't been able to focus on this issue this week. So maybe you could update me on where we're at, and then we'll pair program and I'll drive and you'll navigate.
Great. Yeah, sounds good. I could share my screen just to show, just to show a little bit. Yeah, so I'm looking at the commits of the issue, just to show what has changed, which isn't much, just a couple of commits. One thing I added, this was kind of interesting. So I don't know if you noticed, but normally when we sort of put this router in so that the router would set based on like whatever you supplied it, and because it's in like a getter and a setter for a computed property, it's always like, it always has to have a value. So when you first load the page, this set actually gets run once, and it sets it pushes it actually just pushes, like, say you just go to like the incident, it will push the same route that it already has, because you're not trying to change the tab or anything, you're just like loading for the first time.
Okay.
But that actually causes an error, which was interesting, like an error in the console. And I dug into it, and I found that it's basically like view router version 3 behavior. Not even necessarily behavior that everyone's super pleased with, because yeah, because it's not like you could think maybe it should be like a warning level type thing. But effectively, what the error is telling you is that you're routing to somewhere that you already are, and it's running all of that routing code. So to
I did see that warning previously, but
yeah,
I thought it went away. Okay.
Yeah. So that was actually causing a problem in our tests, because our tests have a rule on them that you can't generate a console error during the
That makes
test,
sense.
or it fails the test. Yeah, so I added this this little thing, and you can probably see it's slightly not very efficient because I'm like setting new tab to this value and then I'm calculating that value again when I should just use new tab. And that's actually my second commit
Okay.
that I did when I realized that that wasn't very efficient. So yeah, that was like a slight change to fix both the test, but also to avoid having to recalculate the route a second time. And particularly in our case, because we're doing some custom stuff, like hiding elements on the page, that we actually don't want to do that twice. It's not destructive, like it doesn't cause any problems, but it's just also not good to do. And I refactored the tests a bit in order to add. So I changed the method signature because I wanted to add like a third parameter. So
What's a
everything's now an
method
object.
signature? What do you mean?
Oh yeah, I can explain. Yeah, so here I just changed what the arguments are. So previously mount component took two arguments. You put in data and options. Now you put in, they're kind of like named.
Yep.
So data's named, options is named, and there's a third one, which is mount. Because sometimes we want to shallow mount, and sometimes we want to like deep mount, I guess.
Yeah.
Like full mount.
I was looking at this recently somewhere else, and I had thought it would make sense if you say like, is shallow mount true or false, and then check that boolean. But why pass why pass mount extended to the mount component function as a whole thing like that? Is there a
good
benefit
question.
or
I guess they're pretty much the same. Yeah, not a huge difference. I would say I very ever so slightly prefer this way because there's fewer lines of code. I think, and fewer conditionals, which is always good. Makes it slightly more readable for someone who's looking at it for the first time. That like if you're not worried about what mount does, that's fine. But if this whole thing was like, let's look at the actual code and see the diff. Like if I had that conditional, this whole thing would be either like nested in an additional level.
Yeah, I did do that.
Or it would be like above.
Annoying.
Yeah, just a bit harder to read. Because every time you sort of parse this method with your brain, you would, at least for me, I would like stop on the conditional and be like, oh, what's that doing? But a lot of the time, you're not actually worried about that because you're looking at something else. Yeah, and this just also, if you've like looked at 100 of these like mount components, I think this is how we tend to do it. So it's also following the convention to a certain extent. But yeah, it's a good question. I totally could have done it that way, and it would have still worked. And that was in order to add these two tests that use the mount extended. Because they're doing something slightly funky here that we we don't always condone, which is that relying on the internals of an external component a little bit.
So relying on the externals of an
the
internal
internals, the
component. Sorry.
internals of an external component. Yeah.
Okay.
So the external component in this case is the tabs component in Bootstrap View.
Okay.
And we're relying on the fact that on two things. I left a comment about this on the issue actually, in case, because I thought it might be kind of an interesting discussion as well. There's did I? Yeah. Yeah, so we're relying on the fact that when you click a tab, it fires the events and changes tab and stuff, which I think is kind of fair to rely on. Like that's not probably going to change. And then the other property we rely on is that the currently selected tab has the class active, which also probably won't change, but it is a little bit naughty to rely on that. But basically that was the only way. It was the only way that the tabs differed at all. Like all of the implementation inside incident tabs basically relies on that class. And on
the class of active.
On the active class to determine the behavior. So like one interesting thing is like normally with view text utils, we'll want to like check if a component exists or not. So if it's like mounted or not. But for all of the tabs, all of like the contents of all the tabs is already mounted. But it's just hidden. Okay. So then the next obvious thing would be in view test utils, there's also like the is visible check, which
so is that an issue for us later, or an issue for us at all, that everything is mounted, it's just not visible? Or
no, that's probably what we want actually, because things like fetching data happens on mount, and we don't want to fetch the data multiple times once the tab has been loaded.
When the tab changes. Oh yeah,
yes,
I see.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're happy to load all the data all at once when we open the page.
Yeah. The best behavior would actually be we load the contents of each tab when you navigate to it first, but then that all of the contents remains there. That would be the best for performance, because the sacrifice here is that it's loading like all of the timeline data when you first load, which could potentially be quite a lot, and that tab isn't necessarily invisible. So that's something where if we use router view to control the showing of the tabs, that might be a little bit more efficient, because I believe router view lets you say only mount this when it first becomes visible,
right?
Based on the route. So we're relying on those properties. So firstly, we're using the button click behavior here, and then the in find active tabs, I've used that to basically filter all of the tab buttons down to the one that is active. And take those tab buttons and then can just check if that one happens to be the one that we're looking for, and that there's only one of them. Yeah.
Right.
And so
Okay. Yeah.
if you take all the tabs that are active and you check that there's only one, and you check that the text in the tab is what we expect,
Yeah.
then that's kind of like saying now we know which tab is selected.
Okay. Yep.
So we can do a test where we click one of the tabs and then check that the tab we want is selected, and also check that the route is correct.
Perfect.
And now sort of like connected those things together and verified that. Like if one of those things breaks, then the tab switching behavior is probably broken, or at least needs to be looked at. So that's why that test exists. The other way to do this test would have been to just totally mock the tabs and totally mock the router, or you could even keep the router in, but you'd just be verifying the index. You'd be verifying like what index is selected on GL tabs.
Okay.
But that test has like much lower surface, and I like it better this way because it's more like an integration test than a unit test. But I think it's good to have an integration test on something like this, where like you could write a unit test, but I think it wouldn't necessarily have like a good enough coverage to catch stuff. And things like this, where we're like integrating with a third-party library like router, I think we want to have more of an integration test
makes sense,
to be safer. And it's unlikely that this behavior in the tabs component is going to change. I think I believe it's pretty stable kind of functionality to rely on.
So are we also able to use this to test like what happens on load? You know, like when you load the page and the URL has /timeline, it's going to render timeline.
Yeah, I did think about that actually, about adding a test for that. The way to do that, you would need to set, if we have a look at the code of the actual timeline. So on load, what happens is the active whoops, this is the wrong file. This active tab gets set. Oh, it's here actually. The active tab index.
Yeah.
And it says if a route dot params has been set, then the active tab is find a tab based on what's in the params. So you'd need to set this early before you mount the component, I think would be the way to do that.
Okay.
Which does, the way the tests are set up, the router get set up before. It's in the before H, so you do have access to that. So at the start of the test, you could say,
oh, I see, right.
Router, you could maybe say router dot params and then like
Mm.
dot set. But actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if that's exactly how the router works. Maybe you go router dot push, so you push beforehand, and then you mount the component. Yeah, but it's a little bit of a weird test because that's not exactly what happens in the real thing.
Yeah.
So it's not like one-to-one, but it is exercising like an extra line of code. So there is value to that. Because otherwise that like active tab conditional wouldn't be. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. I'm looking at the commit. Sorry. Yeah, normally you wouldn't go down this branch on load. So yeah, it is.
Why not?
It is checking another branch. Oh, because route.params is null initially.
Unless someone's navigating to /timeline,
Yes.
which is like,
yeah.
This is the point we're doing it, right?
Yeah. So that's why it's good
Yeah,
to
yeah.
exercise this branch in a test.
Yeah.
The other way to do it, which you'd probably want to do anyway, is to. So we could potentially skip the unit test version of this because we know it's going to be tested in a feature test. Is to add a feature test.
Oh, yeah.
So that would be in Rails using Capybara to load the specific path straight out of the gate, and then check that after everything's loaded, check that the timeline content is there and visible. And yeah, unlike Vue test utils, which in this case doesn't know if something visible or not, like it thinks that all the tabs are visible. Over in Capybara land, it does know that because it's actually loading a full style sheet and it's running all of the JavaScript, and it has a real DOM. So it knows that at some point in the hierarchy that display none is getting set. Yeah, so today there's a few things we could do. We could like I saw that there's like a spec failing, so we could make this one pass, or we could add a feature spec, or we could add
there was a problem.
that load spec.
There was a problem you brought up before that you were saying that when we load, because we rewrote how the routing works, if you load any issue, it now changes the URL to like issue/incident.
Yeah.
Is that still a problem? I read it.
It is. Yeah. That one, I didn't want to mention that one because that's kind of a really specific issue that might not teach much. Although on the other hand, it's the kind of thing that actually could be useful to sort of see how this works.
But it's also a Rails problem, right? And we can get some back-end help on there.
Yeah. I know how to solve that one. And I could briefly explain why this exists. It's kind of strange behavior.
I mean, it'd be interesting for me, at least.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, cool. So this stems from a piece of tech debt that exists for incidents only. So essentially, when we created the concept of incidents in GitLab, we made a new controller. So yeah, that's a Rails concept, that Rails has controllers, and yeah, that it's essentially like the controller is the entry point from the route. So when the Rails server is running and the route gets hit by a request, there's like this giant routes file that defines all of the different routes that the server can respond to, and then that points the request to a controller.
So can you say this bit again?
Yep. So there's like I'll bring up a file because it's kind of interesting to look at. So it's like project route. Oh, like that was there actually. Yeah, config/route/project for like anything that's like a route within a project, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So then it's this like giant file, like nearly 1,000 lines long, where there's a few different ways, like a few different kinds of syntax to define stuff. But if we look at the timeline one, oh, hey, I'm not actually on the right branch. But anyway, this is what it looked like before. When you go like project/issues/incident/ then the ID of the incident, it will go to the incidents controller and use the show, and I believe the concept and terminology for that is resource.
Okay.
But it will go and find like the it will display the show page of incidents, and then this is the path that it will create for that. So further on, and like in the controller and stuff, if you want to like read the path, like the URL, you can access this property. It gets like auto-generated, and it'll generate like a URL, like a relative URL and an absolute URL and things like that for you. But you just have to give the path a name. I could be totally wrong on some of these concepts, by the way. This is just how I understand it, but I'm not a Rails dev, so there's probably a lot more going on that I'm not explaining. Yeah, so we can see like alert management is similar. And I think the way this works is like when you go to just project/alert management, it will show the index page, which is like a list of alerts. And then if you go to a specific ID, then it shows the details page. So that's like kind of how the routing is set up. It's all of that behavior is kind of defined here. And then and same here, if you go to like incidents, and this is just like the Rails syntax of saying, if you go to just incidents without an ID, show the index. And then we can look at the incidents controller to see where that stuff lands. So in here, there's like some public stuff and some private stuff. So everything below here is private and used by the public. What's exposed publicly. So for example, it will load the incident. I believe this is like fetching it from the database and stuff, but only on show. So going back to that, back to where we were, you can see the show is showing the incident, and that's how that is hooked up.
Okay.
So show so this is the line of code that says load the incident when you go to the show page.
Okay.
And this is the bit of code that says when you have an ID, go to the show page. So that's how that sort of connects together. To me, it's like a little bit of black magic because I'm not, an expert at Rails or anything. So I don't know enough to like necessarily like maybe refactor some of this to make it better, or like, no, I don't know all the ways you can those things interact, but I know enough that I could like add a new page, load a resource, and then give it to a backend person for review, and they'll like make it better.
Okay, that makes sense.
This
Cool.
is also where we add feature flags to the front end, and also where we do something like, so the other thing I should mention is all of the stuff in the controller is accessed by the Haml template. So the Haml template will have like a reference to the incident where it like loads the incident in as like a HTML data attribute or something like that. And then that gets passed to the front end. So if we can look at that as well, to kind of complete the picture. Incidents, and there's a corresponding show .html.haml, so we know that's what's getting loaded. So all this is saying is it's loading it's actually just rendering the issue page, and the equivalent like show for issues. And it's adding like incidents to the breadcrumbs, which is like the like project / incident stuff. I'll just show that. We don't have an issue linked. I just go to like a random issue. These are all like private. Here's one. So this is the breadcrumb. It's like this section of the page. So if you were to look at an incident, it would say incident there.
Okay.
Right. Because we see that in the add to breadcrumbs.
Okay.
So this is some stuff that's going on there. It's also like loading the CSS through this helper. And that's kind of a little bit about the template, the controller, and the route, and how they all relate to each other. And then back to our specific problem, when we first created incidents, we made a new controller, and it basically just delegates to the issues controller because we still want to load everything that a normal issue, well, most things that a normal issue has. But there's the interesting thing with incidents is that you can also load an incident with just the issues controller and without the incidents controller. And I think that's technical debt because we wanted to unify it so that it was only using the incidents controller for incidents and the issues controller for issues. So all of the extra stuff that's in the incident controller, like loading the incident, also exists in the issues controller. So we're duplicating a lot of code there. To make it work for both issues slash blah and incident slash blah. When you like look at the URL for a specific issue or a specific incident. Yeah, and that I think it was done that way because incidents show up in the issues list. So you can click them from the issues list and it like displays the issue URL. Long term, I'm not sure exactly how we want to handle it. Like, do we want to have just one controller which handles incidents? And it can still delegate stuff to the issues controller. And that would mean that we no longer need to put incident stuff in the issues controller. And I think that would be like a clean way of doing things. We're not going to solve that issue as part of this, but yeah. And then the specific issue that I found here was that we're supplying a path to the router to tell it which URL to attach to. And we're supplying the incidents one. And what I didn't realize, but kind of makes sense, is that if you give it a URL that has like extra stuff in it, then it overwrites what's there. So when you put in like a base path that has the slash incident in it, even when you just go and look at the incident from the issues list, which shouldn't have slash incident in it, the router is adding it when the page loads. So that's kind of strange behavior that is probably wrong.
So that doesn't happen for every issue, then only for issues that are also incidents?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. But you can look at an issue, you can look at an incident as an issue if you navigate from the issues page. Yes.
And it doesn't display it any differently if the URL is different. Okay. It still shows the timeline tab and everything, even if you go just like issue slash blah. But yeah, and that's because that's using the issues controller directly, and all of the incident stuff is implemented in that controller.
Okay. Well, that doesn't seem like that big of an issue then, because if
the issue is that we're changing the URL on the person, and that might be unexpected.
But they're already going from issues to the issue detail page, but they've selected an issue which is actually an incident.
Yeah.
So it would make sense to go to issue incident number. I mean, maybe it's a question for product manager.
Yeah. Originally, we didn't want to do that.
Okay, that was a purposeful decision.
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Cool.
I'm not sure the rationale behind that, but I think it was just that, like, we're adding stuff to an issue. We're adding things to an issue, so we want those issues to still behave like issues if people aren't like in the incident, if they're looking at them from an issue perspective and they're not like in the incident management team.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just like a regular person looking at issues. Or also because you can like promote an issue to an incident, and we didn't want to like have that action remove it from the issues list because that could be confusing. And someone someone might have a link to the issue saved already, like in a comment somewhere. So that still has to work even if you change the issue to an incident. Yeah, so definitely we want to like maintain that URL,
Mhm.
and then if they navigate to it, there's no reason to add incident to the URL
Yeah,
when
yeah,
we
that
don't
makes
have to.
sense.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, that makes
but
sense.
it's a good question. Like it is something that it's kind of strange behavior. Definitely without any context, you as a user, like you wouldn't necessarily realize all of the stuff that's going on under the hood.
Mm.
Yeah, but yeah, for the purposes of this MR, I don't think we want to change that behavior, but it is something we could discuss separately, maybe with the product or UX people.
Mhm.
Yeah, and also we should probably make an issue to unify the controllers, or like to at least to move the incident stuff out of the issue controller, because there's this code duplication until we do that.
Mm.
And I
When
could
it's
show you what exactly was duplicated in this case.
Mm.
Here, like the issues controller has this helper that does a thing called like load initial data. This is like data that is present on the page when the HTML is like initially returned to the client. So that stuff like the ID of the issue that you're looking at, and
Uh-huh.
then the page can use that to make like further requests. So this is kind of like, this is what we want to be loaded right at the start when they first look at the page, so that, and we don't want this stuff to require like a separate request to the backend.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Mhm.
So it's things that would maybe add like jank to the page if they happened later. So an example of that is like loading the tabs. Like if that happened much later, like after a separate request,
Mm.
someone might already be trying to click something on the page, and it all like jumps. So
Yep.
so all the tab stuff we want to be there ahead of time. Yeah, and I've added the base path, which gets loaded into the router. And then it's also been added to this helper that runs on the incident page.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's on both, so that both controllers can have access to the right data.
Mhm.
But this duplication is annoying because we never want to like duplicate code. There's always a
Yep.
risk that if someone changes it, they forget one of the locations, and then now it doesn't work all the time
Yep.
and stuff. So yeah, that's why it would be good to move the incident stuff out of the issues controller into like the incidents one, and always use the incidents controller when we have an incident.
Okay. So this change, has that fixed it? What you've done there? Like you're adding the path?
No, because I was naive when I added this. I just added the incident path
Mhm.
because I forgot that there were two routes, and then
Uh-huh.
I'm adding the same path in the issues controller.
Mm.
But this should actually be loading the issues path, not the
Oh,
incident
I
path.
see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
if it was if we were doing that, then the base path would be correct, and we would yeah, we wouldn't be changing the route.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be the fix for that.
Okay, so we've got
We
15
actually
minutes. Do you want to?
yeah, what do we want to code?
maybe we can do the tests so that I can try for a little bit.
Yeah, sounds good.
But some of our tests are broken at the moment, you said.
Yeah, and it's actually related to what we've just been looking at. There's a test that verifies the data that's being added by the helper to the controller.
Verifies
So
data. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
This like extra line that I've added in the issues helper, the test that checks the output of the helper is failing because we've changed the helper without changing the test.
This is the aspect test.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the failure here. It's saying incidents helper incident data method returns the correct set of data, and there's an additional line there that it didn't expect, which is the incident path, and there's also, this is just saying there's a comma that's been added to the empty list SVG path.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So I'll take over sharing and
yep,
the crack. So I've lost the issue. Oh, that's annoying. I've lost the issue.
Do you want the email link?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, the email.
Yeah. I'll put it in the chat, the Zoom chat.
Thanks.
There we go.
Okay. Yep. Cool. Okay. So here's our failed pipeline with the failed test. So I'm just looking for the name of the test that's failed. Surely it'll be the first.
If you scroll right down to the bottom, I think there's some other failures in there that aren't necessarily like failing the whole thing. But yeah, there it is.
Two there.
Yeah, there's one for EU. So you're wanting the second one actually, because this isn't not Enterprise Edition code.
Okay. What's the difference in incident when with Enterprise or not?
Not sure off the top of my head. I think it might be the alert data. I don't know if I'm not sure if we showed the alert details or the metric images in Enterprise mode. But yeah, it's one of those features. The timeline we've shown both for sure. So in our case, yeah, we don't need that mode.
All right, so this is the empty list SVG path that has an extra comma you were saying?
Yeah. Oh, okay, that's interesting. It does have a comma there. Oh, maybe that one's fine. I think you could possibly.
We just need to add this, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if the robo thing will automatically change these to singles, but let's see. No, doesn't seem like.
Hmm.
I guess that means
Oh yeah,
we'll
it's same.
trailing
So,
comma.
yeah. Mhm.
And then to run this, we do bin / aspect, right?
Yeah.
Spec.
Bin / aspect space path. I think relative path also works as well.
Oh, okay, cool. So these ones take a while to run.
Mm. Yeah, it'll take
See
a
if there's
minute,
anything
especially
else
the
that's
first
failed.
time.
There's just that one failure.
Yeah, that's it. So that, in theory, if we fix that, then it should make the test go green.
Yep. This like namespace for project 4, is this being created within this aspect?
It is, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's like when we
that's the
create the
lead.
project and things.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there, if you go right up, I think there's that yeah, build stubbed. I think that's what's creating the sample data.
So there's a function somewhere called build stubbed that
Yeah.
you can say I want a project and it creates a project.
Yeah.
And when it does that, it says namespace 4 and project 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like one question when you see something like that is like, is it going to be consistently the same?
Yeah.
Or is that, are we going to
This is
make
for
flaky
arbitrary.
tests by?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure. And that's the sort of thing where I would tend to get it working and push it, and then either I'll ask someone in the baking team, or I would just put it in review and see what the reviewer says.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because like whoever I ask, I'm gonna point to the MR anyway, and at that point, if they're getting familiar with it, then it's probably more efficient if they review it as well.
Say again?
Yeah.
If they're
like rather than pulling in like one person to ask the question to and like another person to review it, and then having both people have to get familiar with it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes
It's
sense.
sometimes better just to combine it. If it's not going to be like a long, lengthy discussion, if it's just like a simple question, I'll just include it in the review. Yeah, because it's going to be just like a one-liner to fix.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. I have a failure.
I guess you could search for like namespace 4 and see.
Oh yeah, that's true.
See if that's baked in. Yeah, it's baked in a bunch of tests. So, yeah, maybe that's okay.
So
the other way to do it would be just be to check that the URL, that the path contains the end piece.
Path contains the end piece. What do you mean?
Yeah, so you would, instead of saying expect data to include that exact string, you could expect data to include, and then for that property, you could do a matcher.
Oh yeah, instead of exact.
Only matches on on the end piece of the string.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but I actually don't know how to do that in Ruby. I could do that in Jest, but not here. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're getting some failures, but I just noticed like these all have arrows and these have colons. So maybe I need to move it up, but not sure. But anyway, we're getting a different error. Undefined can create group. Doesn't seem like a related error, does it?
Yeah, but it's happening. It's happening here actually. Oh, because you're only
What do you
running a
mean here?
test, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the order.
I wonder if
Let's
there's
try that.
some. Yeah, that's odd. I'm not sure what's causing that.
We've only got a couple of minutes, so it's probably not going to run in time. But yeah, I can work on this next and see if I can get this running. It's probably, yeah, no, it's not. Well, oh, hang on.
Oh yeah, so it actually did
It's
run
more
that time.
useful. Yeah, okay, cool. So maybe it just needed the order, but we're still getting not the right thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, namespace 1, project 1.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. So some sort of matcher might be required there.
Oh,
I guess
like
the other
this.
way you could do that.
That's doing a match, right?
Yeah. Although I'm looking at how the other properties do it. So like project path is this or new or like issue path. Issue path is almost exactly what we're getting. So I think yeah.
Oh yeah. So we
If
run
you do
the
something
function
similar
that says get the
route
path.
or get the path, yeah. For that route. So we could do that. That underline. Maybe underneath issue path we go let incident path and then project. Yeah, the inner bit will be project underscore issues underscore incident underscore path, I believe.
Like this?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. Yeah. And then after issues, in the middle of that, what you just pasted.
Sorry.
So you see how it goes project underscore issues? Yeah. And then incident underscore path. So it'll be like issues underscore incident underscore path, I think. I'll just double check.
Like that.
But that's what is defined in the in that project slash routes, that route slash project.rb that we were looking at earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, we could just do like this, right? Copy the same one that you made.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you've got a trailing comma.
Yep.
Oh yeah, it'll want you to put in the issue possibly.
Can we just do that?
Yep.
So now,
except what's being passed in is kind of referenced. It's not referenced correctly.
Oh,
because we don't have issuable. But that is
you have project.
Yeah, so we have project, so you can remove issuable.project, and then I think issueable might be added further down in the test. We must be creating that somewhere. Create incident. So at this point, where we're writing it, we actually don't have an issueable because it's way at the top of the test.
Okay.
But somewhere there's an issue being created, and then after that, we could copy a link to that, the reference to that incident. Use that. Yeah, so it's saying like let create incident true, and it's saying
incident
further down context
this
the
one.
user can. Oh, okay, yeah, no, sorry, that's something else. That's just setting a permission.
This one? No.
Allow helper to receive
this creates an
with
incident.
issue create incident. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, my Rails knowledge isn't good enough to know how to get the reference for that. But I wonder if it's if you pull create incident out and you go let, because presumably when you create an incident, it's returning a reference to the incident, which is what's going into that with method. So you could possibly break that out to say, yeah, let colon incident, and then in brackets create incident. But yeah, sort of similar to how they've done build stopped. Yeah, so possibly. Yeah, I don't know if that syntax is quite correct, but I don't know what it should be.
I'll ask for help from
yeah, this would be a great time for someone with some Rails, more Rails knowledge than us to have a look.
Oh, we could bring
looking up create.
We'll bring it to the Friday pair programming, front end pair programming. Oh, actually, this Friday is Family and Friends Day, so.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, I'll find out.
Cool.
So
yeah, the other way would be the search.
Time.
Yeah.
We might just stop it here, and then
sounds good.
We can if people ask, we can point to it. But yeah,
yeah.
If you got questions, feel free to ask either on the YouTube or on the issue itself. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, I'll stop sharing and I'll